The locker had my name on it. I'd never worked there before. That was the part people keep trying to soften when I tell them. They keep asking if there was another Mara Ellis in the county. They ask if the nameplate could have been moved somewhere else. They asked if I was tired or stressed or if someone was playing a joke on me because temp workers are easy targets in old buildings full of bored men with keys. They ask these questions because they want the story to stay small enough to file. I understand why they ask. A wrong name on a locker sounds like a mistake. A mistake is survivable. A mistake can be corrected, initialed, rescanned, reprinted. What I found inside was not a mistake. It was an inventory. The job was supposed to last 4 days. That mattered. I've been doing the kind of work people call flexible, when they don't have to live on it. Data cleanup for a dental office, weekend inventory at a hardware store, 2 weeks scanning old invoices for a roofing company whose owner kept calling me Melissa even after I corrected him twice. I was 29, overqualified for half the jobs I got, and underconnected for the ones that would have paid enough to stop worrying. 4 days of county contract work meant rent without touching the emergency card. That was one of the reasons I took it. 4 days, decent hourly rate, no customer service, no phones, no pretending to be excited about growth opportunities. Just inventory work in an old county building before renovation. The posting said temporary record support, physical cataloging, light lifting, attention to detail required. It didn't say police. It didn't say evidence. It didn't say abandoned personal effects. And it definitely didn't say the building might already know your name. I had attention to detail. What I didn't have was stable work, so I applied before I finished reading the description. They sent me to the old precinct annex on Corridor Street. The building had been closed for 6 years. Not abandoned exactly. County buildings don't get abandoned. They get decommissioned, repurposed, fenced off, studied, delayed, and eventually turned into something with glass doors and a historical plaque pretending the past was always clean. The North Precinct was in the delayed stage. The brass letters had been pried off the front, but the shadows remained above the door. You could still read police if the light hit the wall right. Someone had removed the flagpole and left the concrete base. The visitor parking signs were still there, faded to pink. A line of orange temporary fencing sagged across the side lot like everyone had agreed to pretend it was security. The upstairs offices had already been stripped. Renovation crews were pulling wires and knocking out old walls. The front lobby smelt like drywall dust, wet cardboard, and coffee from a machine nobody cleaned. Plastic sheeting hung where the records counter used to be. My work was in the basement. Old locker room, old property cage, old roll call board still bolted to the wall, though every name had been scraped off with something sharper than a paint scraper. The basement had that institutional underground smell: damp concrete, old paper, floor wax, rust, and something electrical that never quite became smoke. A yellow line was painted on the floor from the stairs to the property cage. Someone had added arrows and red tape every few feet, but most of the tape had peeled at the corners. Rows of gray metal lockers stood under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects trapped in glass. Some were dented, some had peeling department stickers, some had combination locks still hanging from them, even though all combinations were supposed to be in the master ledger. A folding table had been set up near the stairs with a laptop, barcode scanner, evidence bags, red property tags, nitrile gloves, and a stack of forms labeled Abandoned Personal Effects Inventory. That should have been my first warning. Not the basement, not the lockers, not even the red tags. The word abandon. People abandon furniture, cars, storage units, bad habits if they were lucky. People are not supposed to abandon pieces of themselves. The county had hired a retired officer to supervise access. His name was Dale Mercer. He was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs with a ring of keys heavy enough to pull his belt sideways. He looked late 60s, maybe older. Big shoulders gone soft, white mustache, the kind of posture people keep after uniforms stop requiring it. "You the temp?" he asked. "Mara Ellis." He looked at my badge sticker, then at my face. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't flinch, but something in him closed, like a drawer sliding shut. For 1 second, he seemed to recognize me. Not like he knew me, like he had been waiting to see which version of me showed up. Then it passed. "Mercer," he said. "You inventory, I open. You don't force anything, you don't pocket anything. You don't read personal notebooks unless the form requires description. Photograph before touching. Bag personal effects separate from county issue." He handed me a clipboard. The top sheet was a sign-in log. My name was already printed on the first line. Ellis, Mara, temp inventory clerk. Below it were 2 blank lines with dates from the next 2 days. I remember thinking that was efficient. I remember that because later I would stop thinking about how often I mistook being expected for being scheduled. "Got it. And if you find anything with your name on it, you call me before you touch it." I looked up. "What?" He was already walking toward the first row. "Conflict of interest," he said. Later, I would understand that was not the real reason. It was just the only reason he could say in a county basement with the lights still on. It sounded reasonable because he said it like paperwork. That's how the worst rules get past you. They wear a normal reason until you're already inside them. The first morning was boring enough that I relaxed. That's another reason people misunderstand. They imagined fear announcing itself. A bad feeling, a shadow, music swelling, if life had the decency to warn you. But most wrong places understand routine better than fear does. They let you label 30 normal things first. They let your hands learn the motion. Bag, tag, scan, save. Bag, tag, scan, save. Then the wrong object appears. Your body is already trained to process it. Locker A001 had 2 cracked mugs, a pair of old running shoes, expired hand sanitizer, 3 uniform patches, and a city map from before the highway expansion. A002 had a gym bag that smelled like closed mouth. A003 had 12 pens, none working, a notebook filled with license plate numbers from 2009. The scanner beeped, the laptop accepted each. I photographed, described, bagged, tagged, and moved on. There's a rhythm to inventory work. Object, description, condition, location, tag, save, object, description, condition, location, tag, save. The county software made a pleasant sound when it accepted an entry, not a harsh beep, a soft 2-note chime, almost approving. Correct description, correct location, correct owner status. The little green checkmark became weirdly satisfying after the 10th locker. After a while, the objects stopped being personal. They became entries. That's the danger, I think. Not that the system hates you, that it doesn't have to. By lunch, I had cleared 23 lockers and found nothing more disturbing than a sandwich wrapper old enough to vote. Then I noticed the numbers. Not all at once, just a little wrongness at the edges of work. Locker A-017 had a case number written on painter's tape inside the door, 17-0441. Locker A-044 had an old property slip from case 44-0089. B-006 contained a plastic bag labeled with incident number B-006, which could have been a coincidence if the bag had not been dated 8 years after the locker assignment ledger said that officer retired. I asked Mercer about it. He was sitting near the stairs with a thermos, doing the crossword and pen. His folded chair faced the locker row, not the table. That should have told me something. Supervisors watch workers. Mercer was watching the lockers. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "You can ask," he said. Not yes, not go ahead, you can ask. I'd already started disliking the way he answered questions like a man leaving himself legal exits. Locker numbers matching case numbers, I said. Is that a system? No. Then why does it keep happening? He didn't look up. Because you're looking. I laughed a little. He didn't. He drew one more letter into the crossword, pressed too hard, and tore the paper. That was when the basement lights flickered. Not out, just down, then up, leaving the locker rows briefly washed in emergency red from the exit sign. Mercer folded his newspaper. We stop at B row today, he said. It's 1:30. We stop at B row today. He didn't say it for the day. He said at B row, like B row was not a section, but a boundary. I should have listened, but I was paid by the day, not the locker, and I'd already learned that old men supervising temp jobs often confuse caution with authority. That's an ugly sentence to admit now, because Mercer was right, and I was alive only because he had been right before. So when Mercer went upstairs to check on the renovation crew, I kept working. B-101, B-102, B-103. Old gloves, badge holders, a cracked flashlight, a pocket Bible with no name, 2 photographs stuck together by humidity. B-109 had a locker key tied to red string. The string bothered me before I knew why. It was not bright red like gift ribbon. It was the dull, waxed kind used on evidence tags, the kind that looked almost brown under bad light. Someone had tied it through the key bow and knotted it 3 times. There was no tag attached, just the string hanging from the key that didn't match the locker it was in. I photographed it, described it as unidentified key with red cord, and waited for the software to chime. The entry didn't turn green. It turned yellow. Owner status, pending. Before I could ask Mercer, the status corrected itself. Returned. B-110 had nothing inside except a single property tag that said, returned to owner. B-111 was empty. B-112 would not open. Then, B-113. The nameplate was tarnished, but not enough. It was not a paper label, not tape, not one of those plastic slip-in tabs you can change when a locker gets reassigned. It was metal, engraved, and screwed into the door with 2 flathead screws, darkened by age. Ellis, Mara, full name, last, comma, first. The way institutions write you when they want you sortable. The way they write you when your life has to fit in a column. For a while I just stood there. The basement seemed to pull back from me. The hum of the lights, the plastic crackle from upstairs, the faint thud of renovation work overhead. All of it became distant. My first thought was not fear. It was annoyance. That sounds ridiculous, but it's true. I thought somebody had wasted my time. Somebody had found my paperwork, made a label, stuck it to a locker, and waited for me to see it. Then I touched the nameplate. It was cold enough to hurt. Not metal and basement cold. Freezer cold. Behind me, Mercer said, "Step away from it." Not loud. That made it worse. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded like he had been waiting for the moment when the day became this. I jumped so hard, my shoulder hit on B-112. He stood at the end of the row, keys in one hand, face pale under the fluorescent light. "You knew it was here," I said. "No. That's my name. I can read. How is my name on a police locker?" Mercer looked at the locker like he was waiting for it to answer first. When it didn't, he gave me the version of the truth he thought I might survive. Sometimes the room gets ahead of the paperwork. That was the first thing he said that made no ordinary sense. Then he looked embarrassed by it, which scared me more than the sentence. People who believe nonsense proudly are easy to dismiss. People who hate the nonsense they believe are harder. I should have left then. I didn't. The inventory software saved me from making the smart choice. The laptop beeped from the folding table. I walked over before Mercer could stop me. A new line had appeared in the batch. B113, Ellis, Mara. 4 items pending. I hadn't entered it. The software cursor blinked at the end of my name. Mercer came up behind me. Do not scan anything from that locker. Why? Because inventory is a claim. It's a list. It is a county list. He pointed at the form on the table. Abandoned property doesn't belong to no one. It belongs to whoever has the authority to hold it until someone proves otherwise. You put your name in that system the wrong way, and you're not a person standing in a basement anymore. You're an owner field, a status, a disposable date. He said it like that explained everything. Then he took his key and started walking towards B113. Wait, I said. You told me not to touch it. I told you not to touch it. Then why are you opening it? Because if I do it, it still has to go through me. He unlocked the locker. The door opened with a sound like old breath leaving a room. Inside were 4 items. Exactly 4. A watch, a receipt, a house key, a small evidence envelope. The watch was mine. Not looked like mine. Mine. There was a nick on the buckle where I caught it against the grocery cart. A pale scratched across the face from the week I helped my cousin move. A little black thread caught under the band where the stitching had started to come loose, and I kept meaning to trim it. Those details should have belonged only to the watch on my wrist. They were all there on the broken one. A cheap black wristwatch with a scratched face and a gray nylon band. I had bought it at a discount store because my phone battery had started dying before the end of this shift. It was on my left wrist while I stared at its twin lying on the locker shelf. The watch in the locker was broken. The face was cracked from the 11 to the 4. The hands had stopped at 113. I looked at my wrist. My watch ticked normally. 1:42 p.m. Mercer said, "Don't pick it up." I picked it up. Of course I did. People think warnings work because they imagine fear making them obedient. It doesn't. Sometimes fear makes you desperate for proof that warning is stupid. The broken watch was warm. That was worse than cold. The second item was a receipt. Mercer made a sound when I reached for it. Not a word, just air through his teeth. I ignored him because the watch had already made the locker personal, and once something becomes personal, people do stupid research with their hands. One of those thin white receipts that curl if you leave them in the car too long. The top had faded except for the date. Tomorrow. The store name was a local pharmacy 2 blocks from my apartment. The purchase was printed halfway down. Bandages, instant coffee, replacement watch battery, house key blank. Total $18.62. Under the payment line, someone had circled the time in red pen. 1:13 p.m. I hadn't been there, I said. Mercer didn't answer. The third item was the key. Plain brass, tagged with a white paper label and tied with red evidence string. The label had an address I didn't recognize. Apartment 4C, 19 Halden Street. I lived on Merrill Lane. I had never heard of Halden Street. At least, I thought I hadn't. Then I remembered an apartment listing I had saved 2 nights earlier at 2 a.m., half asleep because the rent was lower and the kitchen had actual windows. I hadn't applied. I hadn't toured. I hadn't even sent a message. The key in the locker was already cut. The fourth item was the envelope. I didn't want to look at it. That's how I knew I had to. The watch could be explained badly. The receipt could be a trick. The key could be coincidence dressed up as fate. but the envelope had the quiet authority of something already accepted by a system larger than me. Small, brown, sealed with red evidence tape. Property biological fragment was printed across the top. My initials were handwritten in the corner, M.E. Inside, visible through the little cloudy window, was a tooth. Not a big, bloody, dramatic thing, just a small white tooth with a dark root line resting in a fold of gauze. My tongue moved before I could stop it, checking the back of my teeth. All there, for now. Mercer closed the locker door gently. You saw enough. I stepped back. What is this? Abandoned property. I'm standing right here. That helps. How does that help? It means you can still object. I hated him then. Not because he scared me, because he was calm. Because he had the voice of a man explaining office procedure while my future sat in a metal locker with a dead watch and a tooth. The laptop beeped again. Item 1 description required. The cursor blinked in an empty field. Then letters appeared by themselves. Black wristwatch, broken. Time stopped at 1:13. I hadn't touched the keyboard. Mercer lunged for the laptop and slammed it shut. The scanner woke anyway. Its little red light swept across the closed laptop like an eye opening. It made one clean beep from the table. A red barcode label printed. B-113-01. The watch in my hand vibrated once. Not the broken one, the real one on my wrist. A cheap watch does not vibrate. Mine had no alarm motor, no notifications, no smart features. It was plastic, quartz, and a battery I kept forgetting to replace. It vibrated anyway. The second hand stopped. 1:13. I dropped the locker watch. It hit the tile and didn't bounce. From somewhere deep in the locker row, metal clicked. One door, then another, then another. Mercer grabbed my arm. We're leaving, but the basement door at the top of the stairs opened before we reached it. A woman came down wearing a renovation hard hat and a reflective vest. She was not one of the crew I'd seen upstairs. She carried a clipboard. Mara Ellis, she said. I stopped. Mercer didn't. Keep walking, he said. The woman smiled like she had spent all day behind counters. Not customer service friendly, not kind. Administrative. She was too clean for the basement. No drywall dust on her vest. No mud on her boots. Her hard hat had no scratches. The badge, clipped to her pocket, was turned backward. But I could see the shape of a county seal through the plastic. We just need your signature on the release. Her voice was bright and flat, the way people sound when the forms matter more than the person reading it. What release? Abandoned property transfer. Mercer stepped between us. She's not signing anything. The woman looked at him then. Her smile changed. Officer Mercer, she said, you already refused once. His hands tightened on my arm. I retired. No, she said, you were retained. The word hung there. Retained. Not hired, not remembered. Kept. Mercer pulled me past her so hard I stumbled. We got to the stairwell door. It wouldn't open. Behind us, lockers began opening down B row. Not all of them, just some. One every few seconds, like a slow count. B-017, B-044, B-006. Numbers I had once noticed earlier. Inside each locker was a neat arrangement of personal effects. Wallets, watches, keys, glasses, photos, shoelaces, wedding rings. Not police gear, not abandoned junk. Lives reduced to inventory. Some lockers had more intimate things. A retainer in a blue case, a folded ultrasound photo, a grocery loyalty card, a school lanyard, a strip of photo booth pictures where one face had been scratched away. Nothing dramatic by itself. That was what made it unbearable. The lockers didn't contain evidence of big final moments. They contained the small things people expect to pick up later. Each locker had a nameplate. Some names were familiar from old local news: missing hikers, runaway teens, a woman from my building who everyone said moved back after her breakup. Some I didn't know. Some had tomorrow's date. The woman with the clipboard was gone. In her place, the laptop sat open on the folding table, though Mercer had closed it. The screen read, "Batch closeout required. Supervisor signature, Dale Mercer. Temp inventory clerk, Mara Ellis." Mercer stared at the screen. "How long has this been happening?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Mercer!" He looked older than he had 10 minutes earlier. "Long enough that I thought I could keep it to old names." "What does that mean?" "Old cases, old lockers, people already gone. The county likes its dead paperwork clean." "That is not an answer." "It's the only one I have that doesn't make me worse than I already am." "I'm not gone." "No," he said. "That's why it wants you signed." The scanner beeped again. A second label printed, B-113-02. The receipt. Then another, B-113-03. The key. The printer paused before the fourth. I looked at the evidence envelope on the locker shelf. "No," I said. The scanner beeped. B-113-04. The tooth. Something shifted in my mouth. Pain flashed along my jaw, sharp and bright enough to make my knees bend. I tasted copper. Mercer shouted something, but I couldn't hear it above the fluorescent hum. Or maybe I could hear him and refuse to understand it. I put one hand to my mouth. One of my molars was loose. Not falling out, not yet. Loose enough to move when my tongue touched it. The inventory had found its object. For one awful second, I understood the system's patience. It didn't need to attack me. It didn't need to drag me to a locker to make the lights explode. It only needed the object and the description to agree. Owner present. Item located. Condition changing. Mercer crossed the room faster than I thought an old man could move. He snatched the barcode scanner off the table and slammed it against the floor. Plastic cracked. The scanner chirped once. Dying. The laptop kept typing. Biological fragment. Tooth. Owner present. The phrase appeared with that same little green check mark beside it. Accepted. Mercer picked up the metal stool and brought it down on the keyboard. Then the screen went black. Every open locker door slammed shut at once. The stairwell door clicked. For a second, neither of us moved. The basement became completely quiet. No hum, no printer, no renovation noise overhead, just my breathing and Mercer's. Then Mercer said, "Run!" We ran. Up the stairs, through the plastic sheeting, past the renovation workers, who shouted something about hard hats. Out the side door into the afternoon light, so bright it looked fake. Halfway up, I heard the basement behind us start printing. Not one printer, many. The sounds came from the lockers themselves, a dry mechanical clatter from behind metal doors, as if every abandoned thing below us had been waiting for paper. I didn't stop until I reached the parking lot. Mercer came out behind me, breathing hard. His face had gone gray. "What was that woman?" I asked. He shook his head. "A clerk. She knew you. They all do." He leaned against the hood of my car and pressed 2 fingers under his jaw like he was checking a pulse. His hand shook. I hadn't seen him shake in the basement. "You were an officer here?" I asked. He nodded once. "North Precinct?" "Property Division." That made sense too late. The keys, the rules, the way he watched the lockers instead of me. "I signed things I should have questioned," he said. "Back when everything was paper, easier to believe paper than people." "All who?" He looked back at the building. "Records." I laughed then, not because anything was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I was going to pull out my own tooth in a county parking lot just to prove it still belonged to me. Mercer took the keys from his belt and threw them into a storm drain. They hit the metal grate with a heavy sound and vanished into dark water below. For a second, he looked relieved. Then the grate rattled once, like something underneath had caught the ring and tested its weight. Mercer stepped back. "What are you doing?" "Retiring property." "You already retired." "No," he said. "I was retained." The same word. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. There was blood on it. I hadn't noticed the gap in his smile before. One lower tooth missing. Fresh or old, I couldn't tell. That was the worst part. The system had made me suspicious of time itself. The next hour is messy in my memory. That happens after fear. People think terror sharpens everything, and it does for a while. Then the ordinary world comes back with forms and questions, and the mind starts dropping pieces because it can't make the two worlds fit together. County administrator, renovation supervisor, somebody from risk management, everyone angry at the broken scanner, everyone more interested in damaged equipment than my name was in their abandoned property system. Mercer told them he dropped the scanner. I told them I felt sick. Nobody asked about B-113. That was the worst part. If someone had denied it too hard, I could have fought them. If someone had laughed, I could have hated them. But they moved around the subject, like furniture in a room they all knew was there but had agreed not to bump into. The risk management woman kept saying, "equipment incident." The administrator kept saying, "scope discrepancy." The renovation supervisor kept asking whether the broken scanner had been county-owned or contract provided. Nobody said locker. Nobody said tooth. Nobody said my name unless they were reading it from a form. Not one person asked why there was a locker with my name on it. When I said it out loud, the administrator looked at the printed work order and frowned. "There is no B-113 on this list." I pointed at the basement door. "There's a whole B row." "No," she said. She turned the clipboard toward me. The inventory scope listed A row only. 23 lockers. I asked to see the digital batch. The administrator turned the laptop toward me with the strained patience of someone humoring a contractor she already planned not to rehire. A-001 through A-023. Complete. No B-row, no scanner damage logged until my clock out. No Dale Mercer assigned as supervisor. Only site access consultant. No basement property cage on the floor plan. No red tags issued. No blue tape arrows. No woman with backward badge. 23 lockers. The exact number I had finished before lunch. B-row didn't exist. The basement map had no B-row. The renovations plan had no B-row. My timesheet showed I clocked out at 1:12 p.m., 1 minute before the watch stopped. Mercer stood beside me, saying nothing. The administrator told me I would be paid for the full day, but the assignment was complete. Complete. That word nearly made me scream. I went home with my real watch still frozen at 1:13, and one molar aching whenever I breathed through my mouth. I put the watch in the drawer and still heard it ticking from across the room. The next morning, I didn't go to the pharmacy. That felt important. I made rules for myself because Mercer's rules kept me alive longer than my instincts did. I didn't visit the pharmacy. I didn't search Halden Street. I didn't touch the watch. I don't sign anything from the county. I don't say abandoned property out loud if I could avoid it. The receipt said I would, so I didn't. I made coffee at home. I wrapped my watch in a towel and put it in a drawer. I ignored the apartment listing on Halden Street. I checked my teeth every 20 minutes until my jaw hurt from checking. At 1:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. Email. Sender. County Property Division. Subject. Abandoned Effects Closeout. Ellis - Mara. I almost deleted it. Instead, I opened it because fear makes people stupid in both directions. There was no message body, just an attachment. I checked the sender twice. It came from a county address, but when I clicked the sender details, the domain had one extra letter in property. PROPERRTY. 2 R's. A typo small enough to miss if you were frightened, which I was. The attachment had no preview icon, just a gray square and a file name. Ellis, Mara, closeout pending.pdf. A PDF scan of the form. Abandoned personal effects inventory. Locker B-113. Owner, Ellis, Mara. Status, incomplete. 4 item lines. The first 3 were filled. Black wristwatch broken. Pharmacy receipt, future dated. Brass house key, Halden Street. The 4th line was blank. Not empty exactly. Waiting. Under supervisor signature, Dale Mercer had written one sentence in blue ink. Owner present. Do not close. Under temp inventory clerk, where my signature should have been, someone had drawn a red line. Not through the blank. Under it. Like a place was being saved. I called Mercer. The number had been disconnected. I drove to the old precinct. I told myself I was going to find Mercer. That was safer than admitting I wanted the building to contradict the email. I wanted to see trucks, workers, the side door, the basement stairs, anything that proved the job had happened in the same world where I still had to buy groceries and pay rent. The building was fenced off. No crews, no county trucks, no plastic sheeting in the windows. Even the shadows of the old brass letters looked fainter, as if the building had started removing proof of itself. A demolition notice had been zip-tied to the gate. The date on it was 3 weeks earlier, before my temp assignment. Through the fence, I could see the side door, the one Mercer and I had run out of. At least, I thought it was the same door. The paint looked older than it should have. The handle was gone. Cinder blocks had been stacked against it from the outside, mortared in place like someone had sealed it months earlier. My memory insisted that door had opened into sunlight. The building insisted it had not opened in years. A red property tag hung from the handle. The wind moved it once. For a second, the tag faced me through the fence, and I thought I saw the first 2 letters of my last name. Then it turned away. Too far to read. Close enough to recognize the shape. I didn't go in. That is the smartest thing I did in this story. I went home. For 2 weeks nothing happened. That was almost worse. Every normal day felt like a delay, not a reprieve. I went to work. I answered emails. I made dinner. I brushed my teeth carefully and inspected the sink afterwards like I had expected part of myself to appear there. My tooth tightened again. The watch stayed stopped. I deleted the Halden Street listing. I blocked the county email address, which is not a real solution to anything, but it felt better than doing nothing. Then, last night, I came home from the grocery store and found a key on my kitchen table. Not by the door, not on the floor, not near the window, centered on the table, aligned with the chair I use when I pay bills. Plain brass, white paper tag, red evidence string. I had locked my apartment before I left. The windows were closed. The deadbolt was still turned. The key sat beside my mail like someone had placed it there carefully and left without disturbing anything else. The tag had tomorrow's date. Under the date was a locker number, C-001. No name, not yet. I didn't touch it. I took a picture first. That was the instinct the job left me in. Photograph before touching. The flash went off, and for one frame, I saw something scratched into the tabletop beneath the key. Not deep, not fresh, just visible in the light. Owner, present. When I lowered the phone, the words were gone. I'm not touching it. It's still on the table as I record this. Every few minutes, the tag turns a little. Even though there's no draft in the room, the blank side keeps trying to face up. I know what will be written there if it does. The locker had my name on it once. The next one is waiting for me to claim it.